Banjo Tooie is one of the most ambitious sequels of a video game ever created. From the sheer size of its worlds to the increased complexity of its missions, this N64 title pulls out all the stops to try and create a universe that is bigger, bolder, and better than its legendary predecessor. By expanding on the excellent framework that Banjo-Kazooie created, Banjo Tooie manages to capture the spirit of the original while developing its own unique identity that's as polarizing as sequels get. While it may not have the universal acclaim that its precursor enjoys, its creatively thematic levels are so densely packed with content that fans are still debating which world is number one, even 20 plus years later. So today, we will explore each level and try to give our own answer to which world is best and which world is worst. Welcome to Every Banjo Tooie World Ranked. Before I get into what makes Grunty Industries the worst of the worlds in Banjo Tooie, I want to first talk about some of the areas where it succeeds. Weldar, the boss of Grunty Industries, is among the best fights in the game and my personal pick for the world's best Jiggy. Turning into a washing machine is a nice bit of fan service for fans of Banjo-Kazooie who remember the Easter egg that would pop up in Mumbo's hut occasionally, and stands out as the game's most memorable transformation. Although it can be easy to get lost in, I respect how interconnected Grunty Industries is by the time you reach the end, with numerous ways to move between each floor. And I love how its music track conveys the mundanity of factory life with slow, brooding notes that have a hint of danger sprinkled into the background. However, that's just about where my positives end, as I can honestly say this is one level I actively dislike. Grunty Industries can be best described as annoying, as many of the ideas they try to implement are frustrating and time-consuming more than anything else. Whether it's the endless backtracking as you search for batteries as Banjo and bunnies as the washing machine, cleaning up crud in the first-person Breagle blasting section, or constantly having to deal with getting caught by security cameras, this sixth world has a way of getting under your skin. For example, Grunty Industries is the only world in which you can't actually do anything but press a switch upon first entry. Almost immediately, you are forced to backtrack to a previous train station that you visited, and only after you've hitched a ride inside does the level truly begin. It's unnecessary and pads out a level that's already the longest in the game. Another poor decision made by Grunty Industries includes forcing the player to exit the quality control room for each time a toxic barrel is hit when going for the conveyor belt Jiggy. It ruins an otherwise fine mission by wasting time for seemingly no reason. They easily could have had Kazooie just lose some health for each toxic barrel hit, which would have severely cut down on the amount of time spent running back and forth between rooms, while also allowing players more opportunities to succeed. Instead, the toxic gas that floods the room with each mistake rapidly drains Kazooie's health and will quickly kill her if she doesn't leave immediately. This is especially annoying because it highlights how pointless dying in Banjo Tooie is to begin with, as the live system from Banjo Kazooie is long gone. And because none of your collectibles are reset upon death, dying only serves to aggravate by making you trek back to where you were from the start of the level. I don't know if it's because of the lame leg spring ability learned here by Kazooie, or the fact that you must come back for 3 Jiggies when going for 100%, but I just don't see a lot to love about Banjo Tooie's sixth world. I could honestly spend an entire video talking about the many issues of Grunty Industries because of the way this world grinds the flow of gameplay to a halt. In a lot of ways, it's surprising that this isn't the final world in the game due to how complex it is, but I'm glad it isn't because it gave Banjo Tooie a chance to recover so as to not end on such a low note. If you're a fan of Grunty Industries, I would honestly love to hear why you enjoy it, because if not for the moves learned in this stage, it would be a world I would skip entirely, which is why I've placed it at the bottom of my list. The title of most polarizing world in Banjo Tooie has to go to the game's water level, Jolly Roger's Lagoon. While most people generally agree that the world is on par with any other stage in the game thematically, the divisive underwater gameplay is what makes this a prime example of a world that you will either love or hate. For some, the ability to explore a vast underwater world without fear of losing air is a dream come true as you plunder for treasure and battle deep-sea monsters. For others, the sluggish controls of the water-based gameplay and lack of distinct visuals make exploring a frustrating and confusing process as you stumble around the underwater caverns trying to find your way. Unfortunately, despite appreciating Jolly Roger's Lagoon's strengths, I tend to fall into the second camp and feel this stage kills a lot of the momentum Banjo Tooie had built up through its first 3 worlds. What makes Jolly Roger's Lagoon so disappointing is how impressed I was by the stage initially, before its massive size and slow-moving pace wore me down. Not only is the seaside town you start in one of the most charming areas in the game, but the discovery of an entire underwater city is among the coolest surprises in any level. Both areas have terrific songs that create different but equally immersive atmospheres that capture the best aspects of life by the water. Each section is filled with rare references that help give the stage personality, like discovering the developers' names on the sunken lockers or helping Tip Up the Turtle from Diddy Kong Racing. And of all the worlds in Banjo Tooie, Jolly Roger's Lagoon's cast of non-playable characters is among the most memorable to interact with. But the gameplay is easily my least favorite in the game, with much of the level requiring the use of Kazooie's sub-aqua aiming to progress. Whether it's fighting off fish to protect the pig named Crispy Bacon, destroying the teeth of the giant orange fish with grenade eggs, or any of the other various uses throughout the underwater section, it's a frustrating ability with poor controls. Much like the airborne egg ability, the fact that you're constantly moving makes it more challenging to aim with Kazooie's oversensitive sight. Coupled with a camera that moves too slow to keep up with you when you're turning, and aiming becomes a disorienting experience. Movement in general is also not fast enough underwater, as even with the knowledge of how to swim fast, it feels like it takes forever to maneuver to where you need to go. While the submarine transformation fixes this, a large majority of the underwater section requires you to be playing as Banjo and Kazooie. In fact, the only Jiggy that even requires the submarine is a Jiggy earned in one of Grunty's many point-based minigames, as you can choose to fight Lord Wu Fok Fok as the bear and bird if you want to. To make matters worse, the Talon Torpedo that you learn with Kazooie highlights this lack of speed each time you use it. It always feels like a slog to swim with Banjo after jetting around at hyperspeed with Kazooie, and had Banjo retained even half of that speed, Jolly Roger's Lagoon would have been much more pleasant to explore. What this amounts to is a level that feels wholly unsatisfying to complete. While I understand why this level might bring a lot of nostalgia to people, it's hard for me to overlook just how little I enjoyed this world's second half because of Jolly Roger's Lagoon's poor controls and immense size. It really highlights the downside of choosing to consolidate the notes into bunches and the Mumbo tokens into Globos, as something that saves a level like Clanker's Cavern from feeling empty is how you are rewarded for swimming around and exploring the world's various nooks and crannies. It would be boring to swim through the large underwater pipes or long winding paths if you weren't being constantly rewarded with collectibles, which is how I feel during Jolly Roger's Lagoon. And even if the controls were fine, and it was just my skill that made the gameplay a chore, the fact that 3 of the 10 Jiggies require backtracking is what solidifies this world as one of my least favorite in Banjo Tooie. The dinosaur-themed pterodactyl land that serves as Banjo Tooie's 5th stage is a level that is too big for its own good. Likely designed this way to accommodate the gargantuan Daddy T-Rex transformation found in Wumba's Wigwam, this world's main issue is that it feels empty. Much like Jolly Roger's Lagoon before it, Pterodactyl Land is hurt not only by the lack of collectibles in the level, but by their placement as well. Too often treasures are lumped together, like the 2 Jiggies obtained up in Scary Terry's nest, which creates vast spaces throughout the map where nothing is found. While these big open areas certainly fit the prehistoric theme the level is going for, they would have been much better off if they served as more than just a backdrop for Banjo and Kazooie as they travel across the stage. Sadly, Pterodactyl Land seems determined to have the duo constantly crisscrossing the world to complete tasks, almost as a way of showing off its massive scope. As much as I enjoy the puzzle of using clockwork Kazooie eggs to bypass the Rocknut tribe's armor, finding them all in this mammoth stage is the most difficult part of the mission. Similarly, locating all the eggs you need to hatch with Kazooie can be a chore and has the potential to waste a lot of your time if you're not sure where they are located. And even when you know exactly what to do, like taking Scrat the Dino to get cured by Mumbo's magic, Pterodactyl Land's missions can seem like they last forever. This leads me to my least favorite Jiggy in Pterodactyl Land, where you must feed burgers to the cavemen in Oogle Boogle Cave. The mission starts by having Banjo and Kazooie head over to Mumbo's skull to take control of the shaman, so that he can use his magic to increase the size of Wumba's wigwam. You must then head back to Mumbo's to regain control of Banjo and Kazooie, before heading back to the wigwam to transform into the Daddy T-Rex. Afterward, you need to travel to Oogle Boogle Cave to scare away the entrance guard with a loud roar, before returning to Wumba's Wigwam once again so you can be turned back into the bear and bird. You must then return to Oogle Boogle Cave and melt all the frozen cavemen inside with fire eggs before taking a secret exit to Witchy World. Here you can obtain the junk food they require from Al's Burgers before returning to the cave to feed each of the 3 cavemen inside. Thankfully, this can be completed with no backtracking by killing yourself in Witchy World to respawn at the Pterodactyl Land exit, but if you aren't privy to that information, it means you'll need to come back after you've learned the claw clamber technique in Grunty Industries. If all that seems convoluted for one Jiggy, that's because it is. Even though I appreciate Banjo Tooie's desire to make its world's objectives more elaborate, this level of back and forth is absurd. The game also gives you no indication that you have an infinite amount of food to feed the cavemen, so if you're like me, that means you repeated those last few steps 3 times each. It's frustrating, not just because of my mistake, but because of how much more streamlined things could have been had you not been forced to transform into the Daddy T-Rex in the first place. Not only would it have opened up Mumbo for other possibilities, but the level's enormous size could have been shrunk all without compromising the core objective of the caveman feeding Jiggy, as there's no reason the small T-Rex couldn't have scared the caveman away, considering learning to roar is one of that transformation's tasks in the first place. It might seem like I'm harping on one mission too much, but it's because it truly illustrates many of the issues that I have with Pterodactyl Land. Even with a clever area like the Stomping Plains, and an ingenious egg upgrade that expands the possibilities of puzzles in the game, Pterodactyl Land is a classic example of wasted potential. For as excited as I was to become a dinosaur, I was disappointed when I realized that its only purpose, in either form, was to unlock blocked paths, and not even in a cool, destructive way that you would expect when playing a T-Rex. Pterodactyl Land is a world that made me focus on all its negative aspects while making it difficult to appreciate its fitting music track and other fun jiggies, which is why it's firmly in the bottom half of Banjo Tooie's worlds. Mayahem Temple is a great example of how Rare was able to respect the veteran players returning from Banjo-Kazooie, while also not complicating things too much for those experiencing the series for the first time. The simplicity of many of the stage's objectives is perfect to allow those who have played the original some time to adjust to the size and scope of Banjo-Tooie's worlds, while being easy enough to allow new players to get comfortable with all the various features they'll be exposed to. Despite importing Banjo and Kazooie's entire moveset from the first title, Mayahem Temple continues to expand the gameplay mechanics to keep things fresh, which is also why a majority of the world's jiggies revolve around one specific ability. However, unlike Mumbo's Mountain from Banjo-Kazooie, Mayahem Temple avoids being a glorified tutorial level thanks to how its size and variety of missions make it feel on par with any of Banjo-Tooie's other stages. Jiggies like the one earned for retrieving a stolen treasure from a sleeping caveman showcase Mayahem's willingness to take the gloves off as it relates to complexity in its missions. It requires you to complete a vertical platforming section, which sees the use of several of the duo's abilities to reach the top. You have to talon trot, flap flip, deal with enemies while grab gripping, use a shock spring jump pad, and then finish it all off with a stealth section that requires a surprisingly gentle touch to complete. While in reality this is still not a very difficult mission, as you can skip most of the platforming if you use the fly pad at the beginning of the world, it's certainly more involved than any mission found in Mumbo's Mountain, and at least has the possibility of stumping less skilled or experienced players. Still, even with a mission like this in mind, there are plenty of extremely easy jiggies to be grabbed, like the ones sitting atop and inside the massive temple the world is named after. What this amounts to is a balanced level of difficulty that will keep you engaged throughout the opening world, but that also hints at the direction the rest of the game will head in. Features like the warp pads foreshadow how every world will be big, and the introduction of Mumbo as a third playable character to go along with the Wumba transformations show that the gameplay will continue to evolve as Banjo-Tooie progresses. Mayahem Temple also displays the game's more cinematic nature as compared to Banjo-Kazooie, as there are quite a few NPCs to interact with and cutscenes to watch. Even the game's infamous backtracking is previewed here, as all but one Jiggy is able to be collected on your first run through the stage, which is actually a large part of why I've rated Mayahem Temple as high as I have. What Mayahem Temple has going for it that levels lower on this list don't have is a sense of flow. It feels fluid to jet around the map grabbing all the collectibles you can find, and even without the knowledge of what to do or where to go, the map's design naturally guides you to important locations you'll need to visit. Mayhem Temple is also not nearly as big as some of Banjo Tooie's later levels, which makes it easier to quickly explore and commit the world's layout to memory. This creates a satisfying sense of completion as you clean up the world's treasures, which is a huge component of what made Banjo-Kazooie the timeless classic that it is. Ultimately, why Mayhem Temple falls down the list is because it isn't particularly memorable, especially in comparison to other Banjo-Tooie levels. Bovina the cow and Dilberta the rat aren't exactly iconic characters that spring to mind when thinking of Banjo-Tooie, and the Stony transformation is one of the least interesting in the game. With no special moves and a painfully slow walking speed, the Stony's not very fun to use even when playing the kickball minigame. I also feel that despite doing a good job with the Mayan theme, its similarities to Mumbo's Mountain make it harder to stand out compared to the other unique worlds seen later on. Mayhem Temple is somewhat forgettable in a game filled with polarizing worlds because while it doesn't do anything horribly wrong, it also doesn't do anything truly exceptional either. In spite of that, Mayhem Temple remains a fine starting world that executes its theme well, organically expands on Banjo-Kazooie's tremendous gameplay, and starts Banjo-Tooie's worlds off on the right foot. Among Banjo-Tooie's best qualities is how it brings to life many unique and creative themes for its worlds. Glitter Gulch Mine is a shining example of this, as it perfectly emulates all the tropes of a western to create an atmosphere fit for an old-timey mineshaft. Complete with a steam engine, a Wild West prospector, minecart rides, and a heavy emphasis on dynamite, Glitter Gulch Mine nails its theme as well as any other level in the game. The level's warm and goofy soundtrack help to give the world a friendly, welcoming tone, while its level design serves to simulate the feeling of spelunking by having you explore many caves and caverns around the mine. Two Jiggies that really epitomize this feeling are the ones earned in the Power Hut basement and the Generator Cavern respectively. Both of these collectibles are found in the darkest parts of the gloomy caverns and encapsulate the feeling of adventure associated with prospecting by requiring Banjo and Kazooie to navigate treacherous paths that sit atop bottomless pits. What helps these Jiggies further stand out is how you are given multiple methods of completing them. Ideally, the game would have you light up the generators in the Generator Cave while splitting Banjo and Kazooie up in the Power Hut basement, but both methods could be disregarded in favor of simply lighting the path yourself with fire eggs. I love the sense of freedom this brings, and in conjunction with other fun Jiggies like the ones earned for speeding to the top of the waterfall and racing Canary Mary, it makes me look forward to revisiting Glitter Gulch Mine in the future. That being said, a few aspects of this stage that fall flat in comparison to other Banjo-Tooie worlds are its boss fight and Wumba transformation. Though I understand that due to the train's requirement to complete other worlds in the game, the developers didn't want to make King Cole too difficult in fear of dissuading players from unlocking it, but they certainly could have done more than have him just wander around aimlessly until you kill him. It's a letdown after Mayhem Temple's fairly fun first-person boss fight, and makes me wonder what cool ideas they could have come up with for a boss like King Cole. Similarly, the detonator transformation feels useless considering you learn to shoot fire eggs before entering the level. My instinct has always been to try and light the fuses of the various TNT barrels with Kazooie as a result, and it's somewhat frustrating that you can't. It makes the transformation feel like a waste, and considering how they had to make it the only transformation that can swim because of the level's river, it seems like an afterthought rather than something integral to the world. Also, while I may not care for the first-person collection mission or searching the flooded caves for its Jiggy, I don't think they actively harm the world and actually add variety to the gameplay. The backtracking is minimal in Glitter Gulch Mine, and the build you'll learn to complete it is one of my favorite new additions to Banjo and Kazooie's toolkit. Overall, I think there is more good than bad in Glitter Gulch Mine, and similar to Mayhem Temple, there is a nice flow of gameplay here. It's a respectable second level that makes few major mistakes, and demonstrates Rare's ability to evolve the gameplay of Banjo-Tooie at a nice, comfortable pace. What I admire about Cloud Cuckoo Land is how it breaks many of the traditions of Banjo-Tooie's worlds on its way to executing a theme that's all about being unconventional, surreal, and bizarre. You have many random areas that are juxtaposed together, such as a giant trash can, a massive block of smelly cheese, a castle made of red jelly, and a rainbow that leads to a pot of gold. There's a fake imposter mumbo-jumbo with his own skull named Mingy Django, who serves as the boss of the level, and nearly straight away you murder an ice block named George by pushing him off a cliff into a pool of boiling water. Along with off-putting details like the reduced number of warp pads found in the stage, these elements help the world feel completely unique. Cloud Cuckoo Land's lack of necessary backtracking for 100% completion, the absence of a Chuffy train station, and the inclusion of only one move to learn also contribute to its one-of-a-kind design. You'll find that bill drilling towards the beginning of the stage reveals magic beans that can be planted to grow beanstalks around Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is a brand new feature introduced only in this final level. The papery-looking enemies that pop out of the ground in the central cavern also drive home that this is like no other place in the game, which is supported by the fact that it also happens to be the only world that's disconnected from the rest. Personally, I love the aesthetic and atmosphere that this creates in Cloud Cuckoo Land. All the diverse islands in the sky stand out clearly from one another, making it easy to remember where important locations are, and with flying pads all over the place, navigating to each of them is easy. It also allows many strange, unrelated ideas to serve as the tasks that you need to complete in order to unlock Jiggies, like beating an aardvark in several athletic competitions, tracking down numbers to a safe combination, and killing a certain number of wasps as the bee transformation. It gives the world a sense of variety and freedom, while fitting the motif of randomness the level is striving for. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the two races against Canary Mary, as they are what most people know this world for. Yes, these infamous missions are as ridiculous as you've heard they are, and it makes getting 100% in this world the single most challenging task in the game by far. It requires a heroic amount of mashing speed and endurance, and even then it may take you dozens of tries before you can complete it. While technically not required to beat the game, it still deserves to be criticized for its huge spike in difficulty, as it's unforgivable how it has tarnished the reputation of what I consider to be an otherwise very good world. Cloud Cuckoo Land takes some chances, and while they may not all be smashing successes, some of Banjo Tooie's most innovative ideas can be found here as a result. Many of the puzzles revolving around the split-up pads in the central cavern come to mind, with a level making full utilization of both Banjo and Kazooie's full toolkits. It makes for a rewarding experience as we get to see a little bit of every technique we've learned over our adventure right before it comes to an end. It's fitting for the final level, and though I've heard that there were plans for Cauldron Keep to be the world's 9th and final world, I'm somewhat glad time constraints forced things to end off on the high note that is Cloud Cuckoo Land. At times, it feels like Banjo Tooie's main objective is simply to push the limits of what you thought was possible with Banjo and Kazooie. Over the course of your adventure, you will add 20 additional abilities to the moves established in Banjo-Kazooie, with none more significant than the split-up pads you gain access to in Witchy World. These not only make an immediate impact in Witchy World itself, requiring the ability to obtain 4 separate Jiggies found in the stage, but they also completely open up the gameplay to hosts of new mechanics that will be explored in later worlds. In fact, Banjo Tooie's identity largely centers around this ability to split the duo up, as every level moving forward makes heavy use of the mechanic. Alongside the game's bleaker, more cynical tone, it is perhaps the single most defining characteristic of Banjo Tooie's design, and what helps it stand out from its predecessor. But speaking of the game's tone, Witchy World also showcases the dry and dark sense of humor of Banjo Tooie more than any other stage in the game. From the conversation with the disgruntled and incompetent carnival workers to the general disarray of the park's rundown amusement rides, Witchy World is exactly what you would imagine a theme park run by Gruntilda would be like. Its brilliant, melancholy soundtrack is haunting and drives home that this is not a place for fun, further evidenced by attractions like Madame Grunty's tent. And while I typically don't see mothers openly abusing their children when I go to Six Flags, scenes like Mrs. Boggy absolutely trouncing her child with a purse remind you of how the frustrations of a theme park can bring out the worst in people. On the other hand, the level's reliance on minigames for many of its Jiggies is a creative way to highlight just how fun carnivals can be. Using your various abilities to ring a bell atop a giant cactus, collect twinklies while driving a bumper car, and jump through hoops in a bounce house are just a few of the tasks you will enjoy as you explore the many sub-areas of the theme park. You'll also man a spaceship for a target shooting game, pop colored balloons with Kazooie's new airborne egg ability, and ascend a flaming spiral slide on your way to 100% completion in Witchy World. This is on top of a fun platforming section in the Star Spinner attraction and a memorable boss fight with Mr. Patch in the central tent. With that in mind, the most important detail that allows these objectives to stay fun is how the level's design makes it easy to find important locales without getting lost. Each area is visually distinct with landmarks that make it simple to navigate, and along with the convenient placement of the warp pads, it makes traversing a level as big as we've seen in the game thus far quick and painless. To that end, unlike the low mobility transformations seen in Banjo Tooie's first two worlds, Witchy World's indestructible armored van is fun to use and makes travel a breeze. Though it's not as thematically appropriate as some of Wumba's other transformations, I can forgive that for how satisfying it is to crush the evil slot machines and theme park staff members that patrol the park. In the end, while Witchy World may not be a perfect level, it is one of the strongest in all of Banjo Tooie, and one of the few that I think matches or surpasses the quality of the worlds found in Banjo Kazooie. Despite a slower pace, it keeps building on the momentum that Mayahem Temple and Glitter Gulch Mine created for it, while simultaneously helping Banjo Tooie settle into its own unique identity. Its cheeky, sarcastic writing helps it easily stand out from Banjo Tooie's other worlds, while its instantly recognizable characters and locales make it an unforgettable experience. And combined with inventive new gameplay and excellent level design, and you get a world that deserves to be near the top of any ranking of Banjo Tooie's worlds. While I could do without the backtracking to Pterodactyl Land's stomping plains and the Coliseum's professional kickball championship, everything else in Hailfire Peaks feels like a refreshing change of pace after the gauntlet that was Grunty Industries. It's a 180-degree turnaround in terms of tone and acts as a sort of palate cleanse for Banjo Tooie. In a lot of ways, Hailfire Peaks actually feels more like it should be a Banjo-Kazooie world than a Banjo Tooie world due to how drastically it changes up the game's feel. The bright, vibrant colors, bouncy, upbeat song, and inclusion of two of Banjo-Kazooie's most iconic NPCs all make Hailfire Peaks feel like it could have easily been that game's 10th world. It's a welcome return to form that combines itself with the best elements of Banjo-Tooie's new abilities to create a breathtaking world that's filled with charm. Nothing illustrates that claim better than the pair of elemental dragons that sit atop a mountain on each side of Hailfire Peaks named Chilly Billy and Chilly Willy. These brothers will harass you as soon as you enter the level and won't stop until you reach their hideouts on each mountain's respective summit. Upon meeting either brother, they mistake you for a pizza delivery boy, and because you don't have their meals, they try to eat you instead. Once you defeat them, a Jiggy is earned for your efforts, as each dragon gives up their desire for pizza and decides to settle for some takeout before flying off. While these extremely basic fights are fun, it's the humorous cutscenes that come with them that give Hailfire Peaks its personality and that make these bosses so memorable. Likewise, missions like the ones where you revive Rare's classic Saberman character or feed Boggy a fish for dinner stand out for the self-aware humor and references in their cutscenes. The same could be said about killing Mildred the Ice Cube, as performing a bill drill is as basic a task as the game could ask of you in its 7th world, but her dramatic final words are what make this Jinjo a memorable one to collect. And finally, perhaps the best example of all is the Jiggy collected in Hailfire Peaks train station that sees you link back up with Gobi the Camel. It's satisfying to see him finally make it to the lava world he alluded to in Banjo-Kazooie after 2 years, which is what makes it even more funny when the duo catches up with him again just to beat barge the water out of him one more time. However, even if Hailfire Peaks lacked these entertaining cutscenes, it would still rank among Banjo Tooie's best worlds for its fantastic platforming and terrific world design. Switching back and forth between the lava and ice sides of Hailfire Peaks couldn't be easier thanks to the many pathways that connect the two areas, including a secret path in Mumbo Skull that simultaneously connects it to Wumba's Wigwam. Along with convenient shortcuts and strategically placed warp pads, Kazooie's ability to fly and glide also make this by far the easiest level to get around. And the level's snowball transformation has quick speed and the ability to easily take enemies out, giving it great mobility in the process. This cuts out a lot of the downtime that you would experience in levels like Pterodactyl Land and Jolly Roger's Lagoon, allowing you to get to engaging Jiggies like the one found in the waste disposal plant pipe faster. All that said, by no means is Hailfire Peaks a perfect stage, but it is, in my opinion, the best that Banjo Tooie has to offer. From its excellent themes to its unforgettable characters, Hailfire Peaks nails everything I love about the Banjo-Kazooie franchise and captures what makes video games such a great art form. Even though I know an official Banjo 3 has no chance of ever happening, it is worlds like this one that force me to keep a small bit of hope alive that through some crazy miracle we might actually get it one day. Regardless, I will still always enjoy going back to Hailfire Peaks for all its wonderful qualities, and truly believe it to be the best world in Banjo Tooie. No matter how wildly the quality of the worlds in Banjo Tooie swing, there is no denying that this N64 sequel is an unforgettable experience. From its massive cast of memorable characters to its interconnected levels, Banjo Tooie is a game that simply oozes personality. By adding its own personal touch to the beloved qualities that gave Banjo-Kazooie its polish, Banjo Tooie has created a polarizing universe that still has fans in debate over 20 years later. It'll always impress me just how high Rare aimed with this title, with every level designed to be more ambitious than the last. And regardless of the game's reputation, it's a title that any fan of Banjo-Kazooie should give a try one day.